on the first painting that's sold. So this is the recent to earlier paintings. This is a painting that's here in the show this weekend called Two Feathers. This is another painting that's here in the show called Cowgirl Poetry. I've done a lot of the reading kinds of things. These are two young girls that live out on the farm. There are 11 kids in the 11 children in the family. These are two sisters. This one is, I probably shouldn't be showing these, but this one's going to be for the Phippen Museum next May. This one and this one, we're just, last weekend we're at the National Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma City. This one's sold. This one's still available. The Indian fellow on the left, I met him doing some landscaping on our lakeside one day a couple of years ago, and I used him for a couple other paintings too, which I can't show you yet. But then the other fellow is a model that he's a reenactor. He's an interesting guy. This guy here, he doesn't need to work. He grew up in a home where he inherited a lot of money, and his great-grandfather was James J. Hill. James J. Hill brought the railroad into Minnesota. He said something like this, there were a lot of Swedes there that needed work, and he said, give me a bunch of Swedes, I think it was with a barrel of whiskey and some snus, and I can build a railroad to hell. This one's going to be in the American Miniature Show in February. This is a young gal that Ellen and I met down in Mexico. And this is a church in Santa Fe in the background. And this is the second one that'll be at the miniature show. This gal is a student of mine. And I named it after her horse, Bella Noche, which means beautiful night. So this one sold at the Phippen last year, or 2 years ago. This one's last year at the Phippen. And then this one and this one were sold at American Miniature last year.
Yeah.
And this one sold at the National Cowboy Museum last year. American Miniature Show. This one sold here at the Mountain Oyster Club, 2019. This is the same young Mexican woman that we met Ellen and I met down in Algodones, Mexico. She was a street vendor, and took a little convincing, but we got the message across, and she became very interested in posing for me. This one and this one sold, these two sold at the National Cowboy Museum 2 years ago. Someone was asking about horses, and if I'm a horse person, and I'm not, I rode horses when I was a kid, but never owned any horses of my own. But I have some cowboy friends that tell me how to paint and what to paint. And when this painting was at the National Cowboy Museum, a lady, a cowgirl, came up to me and she says, "You really paint good horses." But as an illustrator, illustrators paint a lot of things they don't know anything about, except that's the first time. And you have to read, you have to study, you have to find out what it's supposed to look like. So when people say you have to do this, you have to know this, you have to experience this to paint that, it's not exactly true. It's certainly helpful, but an illustrator has to paint a lot of things they've never experienced personally. Sold at the American Miniature Show at Settlers West. I did a lot of reading, a series on reading. I like reading, and I thought I should, it just sort of came on that, after that first painting, that maybe I should just do this as kind of a thing for a while and see where it goes. And every one of them is sold, the reading kind of things. This one sold here. This one sold here. American Miniature Show, American Miniature Show. I mean, when I was a kid, I learned about Andy Oakley and Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and Hopalong Cassidy, so I was kind of a cowboy. In fact, we live west of the Mississippi, so does that count? Two sisters reading a book. Here's the first painting I sold at Settlers West, called She Reads to Know She Is Not Alone. That comes from a C.S. Lewis movie. It's sort of a, it's not exactly the quote, but the quote was similar to that. Show a few more pieces here. This one and this one sold to a Kansas farmer. Now, there was some talk at the table tonight about people not knowing, you know, how do you get people into a gallery to sell artwork? This farmer is my cousin. And he took great interest in what I was doing, and never had bought any artwork. In fact, he was, I would publish a book of my work every year just to update my portfolio. He began buying those books, tearing out the pages and framing it. So when we visited him a couple of years ago, he had his whole house was, I mean, I'm serious, his whole house was full of framed prints. And so he bought these two pieces because of his growing interest in art. Just quickly, this is one I did as a trade in 2019. Ray Gibby was the Artist of the Year. And Ray and I had been talking online before I knew anything about what was going to happen, and so I met him here at the show. Last year, I think it was in, when was it? It was toward the end of the year. He on Instagram, he showed a couple of pieces, or a piece, it was a little wren on its tippy toes, singing with all its might. Sculpture, yeah. And I just loved that little piece. And I contacted Ray and I said, hey Ray, how about if I do a portrait of your wife for a couple of those pieces? And the short of it is his wife was too bashful to get her portrait done. I wish I could have done it. But so Ray gave me this historical piece to paint. It was in black and white by Curtis. And I just painted it. I put the colors to it, and we did a trade. This is Jack, the guy that was in that, the Native American guy and the trader pictures earlier on. That's Jack under normal conditions. This is April Stonedahl, the gal that did the basket weaving for my frame. That's Jack again. Jack's beard comes and goes. And then this is the last one of this series. This was done for Bob Funk, who owns Express Ranch in Yukon, Oklahoma. He has a cow ranch and a cattle ranch and a horse ranch. And his crew got together and hired me to do this painting for him, because his horses were in the Tournament of Roses in 2020. So that's it. Now we can have questions.
We have time for a few questions, but let me ask the first one. The biking series seemed incredibly ambitious. Do you see yourself doing anything similarly, or is that it for that?
Well, I wanted to do a Native American sequel to that.
Oh,
They talked about doing it, but it just hasn't. I'm waiting for them to move on it, but
any other questions here tonight?
yes.
So I assume central Minnesota is not the hotbed of illustrators like New York or Los Angeles would be. How did you get in contact with so many magazines? Or did they get in contact with you, or?
Well, I had to learn everything the hard way, I learned that if you open up a magazine, there's a name in there for a person called the art director. So I would call the art director, and I would say, you know, if they wanted my work, once I got a working relationship with them, I'd say, do you know any other art directors that would like to use my work? So that was my best in to other art directors.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I do want to mention the fact that Myron is our honorary artist of the year. And I think now you can see why.